Happy Thursday, everybody. It's NTI Day 27, April 30th, and we are going to be looking at classifying quadrilaterals and parallelograms. Right now, that doesn't mean a lot to you because you don't know what the word quadrilateral or parallelogram means. So we're going to dive into that first, that rich vocabulary. So first, before I even get started with quadrilateral or parallelogram, I felt like I should have taught this to you a couple lessons ago, but here I am. I'm just going to throw it in there with it. The word polygon. The word polygon pretty much just means a shape that you look at that has more than three sides. So any 2D shape that you can imagine. Okay, so I'm just going to put a fancy term for any 2D shape. When you Google it, it says something like anything more than a three-sided figure. Well, you don't really have a figure that's less than three sides, aside from a circle. Okay, so a circle wouldn't count as a polygon. Okay, so it's a fancy term for any 2D shape, so the shapes that we've been looking at. Now, let's dive into what's a quadrilateral and how are we going to be able to classify them, meaning how are we going to be able to identify them and say, yes, they belong in the quadrilateral pile. Well, quadrilateral, quad, means four. Okay? And then lateral, it means sides. So the word quadrilateral literally means four sides. So it's a four-sided figure. So think to all the fancy terms. I didn't mean to underline that. Think about all the fancy shapes that we have looked at and how we know the names of them, and think about which of those shapes had four sides. Well, that would be your quadrilateral. Okay, and we're going to really look at those today. And the last fancy term that we're going to look at is parallelogram. It sounds like we looked at parallel sides yesterday. Well, it's the same thing, except you have to have two sets of parallel sides. Okay, meaning that they never cross and that they never meet. So there has to be two sets of these. So let's see which of these shapes that we're going to dive in today, because we're going to look at four different shapes, which of the four shapes are quadrilaterals and which of the four shapes are parallelograms. Let's start with the rectangle. Okay, here's a basic rectangle. Classification, meaning we're going to put, is it a polygon? Is it a parallelogram? Is it a quadrilateral? Okay, so our classification on a rectangle, first off, you have to think, is it a quadrilateral? So a quadrilateral meaning it has four sides. Does it have four sides? Well, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think it does qualify as a quadrilateral. There we go. Quadrilateral. I spelled that wrong. There we go. Left out of that. Okay, and then we've got to think, is it a parallelogram? So it has to have two sets of parallel sides. So if I'm going to, let's make this blue. I'm going here and I can draw. Here's one set of parallel sides, they're right here. And I didn't even know I had this nifty drawing tool until Sawyer Stearns decided to make an NTI video and use it. And now I just can't believe that I haven't been using this tool this whole time. So shout out to Sawyer for being more tech savvy than his teachers, always. Okay, so we had one set of parallel sides is here. It's the blue. And then our second set of parallel sides are right here. Okay, so it does have two sets of parallel sides, so it is a parallelogram. What is with my internet? There we go. All right. So it does classify as both those. And of course, it is a 2D shape that has more than three sides, so it would classify as a polygon. Okay, now we can look at the attributes. I noticed on y'all's quiz from yesterday that we are struggling with finding different attributes. Remember, attributes are types of angles and types of lines. So let's start with the types of angles. Does it have an acute angle? Acute angle meaning less than 90 degrees. It does not. Does it have an obtuse angle? Meaning it has more, meaning it measures more than 90 degrees. It does not. Does it have a right angle? It does. It has 4 right angles. Okay, now let's look at lines. Does it have parallel lines? It does. It's a parallelogram. Parallel lines. Okay. Does it have intersecting lines? It does not. Remember, intersecting lines make a V. Okay, they make obtuse or acute angles. We don't have any obtuse or acute angles, so we do not have intersecting lines. Does it have perpendicular lines? It does, because it has 4 right angles. All right, and those would be our attributes. Everybody getting the hang of this? Okay, let's classify our next shape. I found this TikTok of this teacher, and she was singing this song about quadrilaterals, and I went to share it this morning and put it on Google Classroom, and I was sad to say that it got taken off of TikTok. I don't know why, but I couldn't find it anymore. But the one part of the song that I could remember that she came up with was, squares can be rectangles, but rectangles can't be squares. And that is huge, because squares can classify as a rectangle, because a rectangle has 2 sets of parallel lines and 4 right angles. Well, so does a square. But a square has 4 equal sides, and a rectangle does not have 4 equal sides. So squares can be rectangles, but rectangles can't be squares. So that's the one line that I remember of the song. Thought I'd share that with you. All right, let's go ahead and classify this square. Okay, is it a quadrilateral? Of course it is. It has 4 equal sides. Bonus. Quadrilateral. Is it a parallelogram, meaning it has 2 sets of parallel sides? We have 1 set of parallel sides here. Not the straightest lines, but you guys can see. And here's a set of parallel sides. So yes, it is a parallelogram. And then, of course, it is a polygon, because it has more than 3 sides and it's a 2-dimensional shape. So it fits all 3 classifications. Its attributes. Does it have acute angles? No. Does it have obtuse angles? No. Does it have right angles? It does. It has 4 right angles. Okay, now we're moving on to lines. Does it have parallel lines? Well, it's a parallelogram. It has 2 sets of parallel lines. So yes, there are parallel lines. Does it have intersecting lines? It does not, because it doesn't have any obtuse or acute angles. So we can put a big on intersecting lines. But it has right angles, so we know that it has perpendicular lines. Okay, so those would be my attributes: 4 right angles, parallel lines, and perpendicular lines. Let's move on to our next shape. Oh, rhombus. Rhombuses look like diamonds if you turn them like this. So I might just turn this one just so we can kind of see. Okay. All right, there's a rhombus. Classification. Does it have 4 sides? It does, so we know it is a quadrilateral. Does it have 2 sets of parallel lines? Well, let's check it out. Here's 1 set of parallel lines. Okay, and then here is 2 sets of parallel lines. These set of lines are never going to meet. They're just alike, meaning that they're the exact same length, and they'll go on forever, but they're never going to meet each other. They're never going to intersect. And that's how we know that this is a parallelogram. It has 2 sets. See, I'll have 2 different colors on there. Ooh. Okay. And then our last one, is it a polygon? Of course it is, Miss Mallory. It has more than 3 sides. It's a typical 2D shape. So let's go ahead and put polygon. All right, the attributes of a rhombus. The first question is, does it have acute angles? Well, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and draw in what would be a right angle. So if I were to start here, this would be like a perfect corner, right? Is this smaller than my right angle, or this angle right here? Or is it bigger than my right angle? It is smaller because look, it has all this space in here. Okay, so I know that it does have acute angles. Let's look at all the angles. Yeah, this one's smaller. Okay, this will go here. This one will go here. Oh, this one looks like it's bigger. Let's check this one out. So this rhombus has 2 acute angles and 2 obtuse angles. So I'm going to put acute. Nothing is typing for me today. Have you noticed that? Acute angle, obtuse angle. Let's put acute angles because there is more than one. Obtuse angles. It doesn't have any right angles. Let's move on to lines. It has parallel lines. Does it have intersecting lines? It does have intersecting lines because we have acute and obtuse angles listed as our attributes. And you can see that these lines intersect on all those corners. And the last type of line is perpendicular. There are no right angles, so I know that there cannot be perpendicular lines. And that would be my classification of a rhombus. And the last shape that we're going to look at is a trapezoid. Now, this one can get kind of tricky. Does it have 4 sides? It does, so we know it is a quadrilateral. Does it have 2 sets of parallel lines? Well, here's one set of parallel lines in the green. And then the other sides, if they were to keep going, eventually they are going to meet. So they are not parallel lines. My green lines, yes, they are parallel. But my purple lines, they are not parallel. So therefore, this is not a parallelogram. And I'm going to say this again. A trapezoid is not a parallelogram because it only has one set of parallel lines. On your quiz today, it's going to ask you, is a trapezoid a parallelogram? It is not a parallelogram. I'm giving you the answer right now. So if you're paying attention to this video, there's no reason you should miss that. Trapezoid is not a parallelogram. It is a quadrilateral. And of course, it is a polygon because it has more than 3 sides. Its attributes. Well, let's look at angles first. Does it have right angles? It does not. Does it have acute angles? Well, let's see. Here would be a right angle, and it's smaller than that, so it does have acute angles. Go ahead and draw these in. Not only does it have acute angles, but it has obtuse angles as well. Because all quadrilaterals equal 360 degrees. If these were less than 90 degrees, this would have to be obtuse in order to equal up to 360 degrees. Oops. Okay, so that tells me I have 2 acute angles and 2 obtuse angles. When it comes to quadrilaterals, if you have 2 acute angles, you're going to have 2 obtuse angles, just like we looked at with our rhombus. Okay, so we know there's no right angles. When it comes to lines, there are a set of parallel lines that we looked at in the green. It does have intersecting lines, as we can see right here, because it has acute and obtuse angles. It does not have perpendicular lines because there are no 90-degree angles. Okay, so those are our 4 main shapes that we're going to look at. We looked at classifying quadrilaterals and classifying parallelograms. And as we also looked at attributes of these shapes. So we got a little extra practice when it comes to looking at the different attributes. So tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to actually compare different polygons. So I have all these different shapes in here, that we're going to look at, and we're going to say they're alike in this way, they're different in this way. So it's important that you know the attributes and that you know the classifications so that you can use those whenever you're comparing them. That's all that I have for today. I hope you guys have a fantastic Thursday. I will see you guys tomorrow.